The alarm bells rang through the massive space station called Nexus Prime. Red lights flashed in every corridor as alien beings rushed toward the main council chamber. Something big was happening, and everyone could feel it. Speaker Veltharion stood at the center of the Great Hall. His 8 tentacles moved in angry patterns as he spoke to the gathered representatives. The council chamber was huge, with seats for 12 different alien species. Each seat was designed for a different type of body. Some had water tanks, others had heat lamps, and a few needed special gas mixtures to breathe. "The humans have gone too far this time," Veltharion said. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation system, turning his words into sounds that each species could understand. "They refuse to listen to our orders. They continue their dangerous experiments." In the back row, the empty human seat sat like a reminder of the problem they faced. Ambassador Tae Young had been called back to Earth 3 days ago. The humans knew what was coming. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Hyun-woo worked late in his laboratory in Seoul. The Earth's moon hung bright outside his window as he studied the glowing screens around him. Numbers and graphs showed the results of his team's latest test. They had done something amazing. They had opened a tiny hole in space itself. "The readings are perfect," said Dr. Soo-jin as she walked into the lab. Her hair was messy from working all night, and she carried a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "We can actually fold space now. We can make 2 distant points touch each other." Hyun-woo nodded, but his face looked worried. "The council sent another message today. They want us to stop all our work. They say it's too dangerous." Soo-jin sat down heavily in her chair. "They don't understand. This technology could help everyone. We could travel across the galaxy in seconds instead of years. We could bring supplies to worlds that need help." "They're afraid," Hyun-woo said simply. "They've been in charge for so long that they can't imagine humans discovering something they don't already know." Back on Nexus Prime, the council meeting grew more heated. The Zarathi representative, a tall being with crystal skin, spoke in musical tones. "The humans are young and foolish. They play with forces they cannot control. Last time a species tried to fold space, they destroyed their entire star system. A furry creature with 6 arms waved them all frantically. That was different. The Cathani didn't understand quantum mechanics like the humans do. These Earth people are actually smart. Smart enough to ignore direct orders?" Veltharion's tentacles turned a darker shade of purple. "Smart enough to threaten the safety of the entire galaxy? I think not." The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to send a fleet to Earth to stop the experiments by force. Others suggested cutting off all trade with human colonies. A few even talked about removing humans from the galactic community completely. Meanwhile, Admiral Wu Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul's Pride, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. His fleet had been called home from the outer colonies. Every human ship in space had received the same order: return to Earth immediately. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Nexus Prime. It's marked as a final ultimatum." Wu Jin's jaw tightened. He had served in the Galactic Peacekeeping Force for 20 years before humans started their own fleet. He knew how the council thought. "Put it on screen." Veltharion's image appeared, looking as angry as his alien features would allow. "By order of the Galactic Council, all human dimensional research must cease immediately. You have 72 standard hours to comply. Any refusal will result in protective measures being taken for the safety of all galactic civilizations." The message ended abruptly. Wu Jin stared at the blank screen for a long moment. His bridge crew waited for orders, but he said nothing. "Admiral?" his first officer asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Wu Jin touched a button on his chair. "Get me a direct line to Dr. Hyun-woo in Seoul, and patch in the President and the Science Council." 20 minutes later, the most important people on Earth were connected on a secure channel. President Kim looked tired. She had been in meetings with world leaders all day. "The Council is serious about this," she said. "They've started moving ships toward our territory." "How many ships?" asked Wu Jin. "Our spies say at least 3 fleets, maybe more." Dr. Hyun-woo spoke up from his lab. "We're so close to a breakthrough. Give us 6 more months and we'll have a working dimensional drive. We could change everything." "Or blow up the solar system," said the head of the Science Council. The Council isn't wrong about the dangers. Folding space creates quantum instabilities. One mistake could tear a hole in reality itself. The Cathani made that mistake because they rushed, Hyunwoo argued. They tried to fold space without understanding quantum foam interactions. We've solved that problem. President Kim rubbed her temples. The question is whether we trust our own scientists or bow to alien pressure. The Council has never been wrong about this kind of thing before. They've never had to deal with humans before either, Wu Jin said quietly. We don't think like other species. We take risks they would never consider. The debate continued through the night. By morning, Earth's leaders had made their decision. President Kim sent the response personally, broadcasting it on all frequencies so every human colony would hear it at the same time. To the Galactic Council, she began, her voice steady and calm. Humanity appreciates your concerns about dimensional research. We understand the risks involved. However, we believe the potential benefits outweigh those risks. We will continue our research with appropriate safety measures. We hope you will reconsider your position and allow us to share our discoveries with the galaxy when they are ready. The message was polite, but clear. Humans would not stop their work. On Nexus Prime, Veltharion read the human response to the full council. The chamber erupted in angry sounds from a dozen different species. Some screeched, others growled, and a few made sounds like breaking glass. They refuse, Veltharion announced when the noise died down. The humans choose to ignore our authority. Then we have no choice, said the Zarathi representative. Protocol 7 must be implemented. A hush fell over the chamber. Protocol 7 had only been used twice in galactic history. It meant complete isolation, cutting off an entire star system from the rest of the galaxy. The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species agreed except the humans, who were not there to vote. Within hours, the largest construction project in galactic history began. Ships from every member species brought materials to the edge of the Sol system. Working together, they built a quantum barrier around Earth's sun and all its planets. The barrier would let nothing in or out. No ships, no messages, no trade. The humans were cut off from the galaxy completely. Let them play with their dangerous toys, Veltharion said as he watched the barrier's completion from his command ship. When their experiments fail and their civilization collapses, they will beg us to let them back in. Then they will learn to follow our rules. The Council fleet departed, leaving the Sol system trapped behind an invisible wall of twisted space-time. They did not stay to watch what the humans would do next. They assumed it would be boring, just a slow decline into primitiveness as humans ran out of resources and gave up their dreams of dimensional travel. They were wrong about everything. 50 years had passed since the barrier went up around the Sol system. Most beings in the galaxy had forgotten humans ever existed. Trade routes went around the empty space where Earth used to be reachable. New species joined the Council. Life moved on. Zekmoth was one of the few who still remembered. As the Council's chief archivist, he kept records of everything that happened in galactic space. His job was to watch and document, not to make decisions. That was fine with him. He preferred facts to politics. He sat in his small office deep inside Nexus Prime, surrounded by floating screens showing data from across the galaxy. Energy readings, ship movements, planetary conditions, everything was recorded and filed away. Most of it was boring. Stars burned at expected rates, planets spun in normal orbits. Nothing unusual happened for months at a time. But today was different. Zekmoth stared at the readings from the Sol barrier with growing confusion. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he checked the numbers again. The energy coming from inside the barrier had changed. 50 years ago, it showed the normal output of a single star system. One sun, several planets, the usual electromagnetic noise from a technological civilization. Now the readings looked completely different, where there used to be random energy, signatures. Now there were patterns, complex mathematical structures that repeated and evolved. The quantum field fluctuations inside the barrier had become organized, like someone was building something massive. That's impossible, Zekmoth muttered to himself. His species had photographic memory, so he could remember exactly what the readings looked like decades ago. This was definitely new. He pulled up historical data and ran comparisons. The change had been gradual at first, starting about 20 years after the barrier went up. But in the last 10 years, the patterns had become much more complex. It was almost like watching a civilization grow, but the energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic database. On the pleasure world of Risatal, Bo Young served drinks to wealthy aliens who came to gamble and relax. She was one of only a few thousand humans left in galactic space, those who had been traveling or working off-world when the barrier went up. Most of them had died of old age by now. She was 93, kept alive by alien medical technology, but she felt every year of it. The bar where she worked was popular with council officials who wanted to forget their problems for a while. Bo Young had learned to listen without seeming to pay attention. Aliens often said interesting things when they thought no one was listening. Tonight, Zekmoth sat at a corner table with a Zarathi scientist named Kristar. Both looked worried. "The readings make no sense," Zekmoth was saying as Bo Young brought him his usual blue drink. "The quantum field inside the Sol barrier is showing structures that shouldn't be possible. It's like space itself is being edited." Kristar's crystal skin flickered with nervous light patterns. "Edited how?" "I don't know. The mathematics are beyond anything we understand. But the energy output is increasing exponentially. Whatever the humans are building in there, it's getting bigger and more complex every year." Bo Young kept her face neutral as she cleaned nearby tables, but her heart was racing. Humans were still alive. Not just alive, they were building something. "Maybe we should lower the barrier and check on them," Kristar suggested. Zekmoth shook his head. "The Council would never agree. They've forgotten humans exist. Besides, Protocol 7 has never been reversed. Once a species is isolated, they stay isolated." Bo Young wanted to ask questions, but she couldn't risk drawing attention to herself. If the Council remembered that humans were still in galactic space, they might decide to remove them completely. That same night, something else unusual happened. A trading ship called the Lucky Strike disappeared while carrying rare metals to the rim worlds. It happened between star systems, in empty space where nothing should have been dangerous. The ship's automated distress beacon never activated. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Captain Veltorian of the Galactic Patrol found nothing at the ship's last known position. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that a ship had ever been there. It was like the Lucky Strike had been erased from existence. "Space pirates?" suggested his first officer. "Pirates leave evidence," Veltorian replied. "They take cargo and leave wreckage. This is something else." Over the next few months, more ships disappeared. Always in empty space, always without warning. The ships that vanished were usually carrying high-tech equipment or rare materials. Passenger ships and simple cargo haulers were left alone. The pattern worried the Council's security division, but they couldn't figure out what was causing it. Some officials suggested that a new alien species might be raiding galactic shipping, but deep space scans found nothing. Whatever was taking the ships was invisible to every sensor the galaxy had. Zekmoth started keeping a private file on the disappearances. His job was to record everything, and he noticed connections that others missed. The missing ships were always carrying something technologically advanced: quantum computers, exotic matter, experimental power cores. Common materials like food or basic machinery were never touched. More importantly, the disappearances were happening in a pattern. If he mapped them out, they formed a slow spiral moving inward from the galaxy's edge toward the more populated core worlds. "It's like someone is collecting things," he told Kristar during one of their secret meetings. "Taking specific technology and moving closer to important systems." But who? And how are they staying invisible? Zekmoth had no answer. But he was starting to suspect something that made him very uncomfortable. The disappearances had started exactly 25 years after the Sol barrier went up. The energy readings from inside the barrier showed complex technology being built, and now someone was stealing the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The connection seemed impossible, but Zekmoth was trained to see patterns others missed. Meanwhile, the Council continued to ignore both problems. They were busy with other concerns: trade disputes between member species, territorial arguments over mining rights, the usual politics of running a galactic civilization. A few missing ships and some strange energy readings weren't important enough to worry about. Speaker: Veltharion had been replaced years ago by a younger politician who barely knew what humans were. The new generation of council members had grown up after the barrier, and they treated the Sol system like empty space on their star charts. But deep in the archives, Zekmoth kept watching and recording. He noticed that the quantum patterns from inside the barrier were becoming more sophisticated. The energy signatures now showed structures that bent space-time in ways that should have required technology centuries more advanced than anything humans had possessed. "They're learning," he whispered to himself one night as he studied the latest readings. "Somehow, they're advancing faster than any species in galactic history." The disappearances continued, always following the same pattern. High-tech cargo vanished without a trace. The spiral of missing ships moved closer to the galactic core. And inside the Sol barrier, unknown technology grew more complex every day. Bo Young dreamed of Earth sometimes. She remembered blue skies and grass and the sound of human voices speaking Korean and English and a dozen other languages. She wondered if anyone she had known was still alive and what they were building behind that invisible wall. In her dreams, the barrier came down, and humans emerged with wonderful new technology to share with the galaxy. In her nightmares, the barrier came down and nothing came out at all. She never dreamed of the third possibility, that when the barrier finally opened, something would come out that the galaxy wasn't prepared to meet. The patterns in space-time continued to grow more complex. The disappearances continued to spiral inward. And in the deepest files of the galactic archives, Zekmoth marked each event and wondered if the Council had made a terrible mistake 50 years ago. Soon, everyone would find out. But for now, the galaxy slept peacefully, unaware that humanity had spent half a century learning to reshape reality itself. The lessons had been painful, but thorough, and the final exam was about to begin. The ship appeared without warning in the most secure area of Nexus Prime. One moment, the space around the station was empty, monitored by dozens of sensors and protected by energy shields that could stop a fleet. The next moment, a strange vessel hung motionless just outside the docking bays. Security alarms screamed through every corridor of the massive station. Commander Thexnall rushed to the main control room, his 4 legs carrying him faster than most beings could run. Behind him, security teams scrambled to their positions. "Report!" Thexnall barked as he reached the command center. "Unknown vessel appeared inside our defense perimeter," his aide replied, all 6 of her arms working at different control panels. "No energy signature detected during materialization, no prior sensor contact. It's like it just stepped into reality." On the main screen, the strange ship rotated slowly. It was unlike any design in the galactic database. Sleek and angular, with surfaces that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. The hull appeared to be solid, but sensors couldn't determine what it was made of. "Weapons?" Thexnall asked. "None detected, but our scanners can't penetrate the hull. For all we know, the entire ship could be a weapon." Thexnall stared at the vessel. In 30 years of security work, he had never seen anything like it. "Any response to our hails?" Before his aide could answer, every communication panel in the control room activated at once. A human voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Hay 1 of the vessel Probability. Requesting permission to dock. We need to talk." The control room fell silent. Human voices hadn't been heard in galactic space for 50 years. Most of the younger staff had never heard one at all. "That's impossible," whispered a technician. "Humans are cut off. The barrier—" "Record everything," Thexnall ordered, "and get me a direct line to the council chambers. They need to hear this." 20 minutes later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most chaotic in decades. Representatives from 12 species shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. The translation system worked overtime trying to keep up. "Impossible!" screeched the avian delegate. "The barrier has never been breached. Our best scientists checked it last year." "Then how is there a human ship at our station?" demanded the new speaker, a young Zarathi named Telvannis who had never dealt with humans before. Veltharion, now old and serving as an advisor, raised one trembling tentacle. "Perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. If humans have found a way, through the barrier, we need to understand how." "Or we destroy their ship immediately," suggested the military advisor. before they can threaten us." "With what?" asked Zekmoth, who had been called to provide historical data. "Our weapons can't target something we can't properly scan. And if they can appear inside our most secure facility, what makes you think we can stop them from leaving?" The debate continued for an hour before Telvanus finally called for order. "We will allow one human to board the station. Full security escort. Any sign of threat, and we respond with lethal force." Captain Haywan walked through the docking bay, like she owned the place. Her environmental suit was unlike anything in the galactic database. It seemed to shimmer and shift, sometimes appearing solid and sometimes nearly transparent. She moved with quiet confidence that made the security guards nervous. She looked young, maybe 30 years old, which was impossible. Even with the best life extension technology, any human who had been an adult when the barrier went up should be elderly by now. Either this was someone who had been a child 50 years ago, or humans had solved aging. The security escort led her through corridors filled with staring aliens. News of her arrival had spread through the station, and beings pressed against windows and doorways to catch a glimpse of the first human seen in decades. The council chambers had been hastily prepared for the meeting. Extra security filled every corner, and weapons scanners had been set to maximum sensitivity. None of them detected anything threatening about the human woman, but that didn't make anyone feel safer. Haywan entered the great chamber and looked around calmly. The 12 species of the council stared at her from their various seats and tanks and environmental pods. She showed no fear or nervousness, just professional interest. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said in perfect galactic standard. Her accent was strange. It had the rhythm of human speech, but the precision of someone who had learned the language from pure mathematics. "How did you get here?" Telvanus demanded. "The barrier around your system is absolute. Nothing can pass through it." Haywan smiled, and somehow that was more unsettling than anger would have been. "The barrier only blocks three-dimensional space. We've learned to work in higher dimensions." "Impossible," said the chief scientist. "Higher dimensional travel is theoretical at best. The energy requirements alone would be impossible for technology based on three-dimensional physics," Haywan agreed. "We don't use that kind of technology anymore." She reached into a pocket that hadn't been there a moment before and pulled out a small device. Half the security team raised their weapons before realizing they were targeting something that looked like a child's toy, a simple cube that seemed to be made of crystallized light. "This contains our gift to you," Haywan said, placing the cube on the floor. "Complete technical specifications for everything we've learned in the past 50 years. Dimensional engineering, quantum consciousness transfer, reality editing protocols, everything. What do you want in return?" Telvanus asked suspiciously. "Nothing," Haywan replied. "We're leaving. This galaxy doesn't have what we need anymore." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Zekmoth leaned forward in his seat. "Leaving to go where?" "Somewhere else. A reality where physics is more flexible, where consciousness can grow without being limited by the constraints of matter and energy." "You're talking nonsense," snapped the military advisor. "Reality is what it is. You can't just change the laws of physics." Haywan's smile became sad. "You still think small. That's why we have to leave." She gestured at the walls around them. "This galaxy is dying. Not physically. You have billions of years before the stars burn out. But intellectually, culturally, you've stopped growing, you've stopped dreaming, you build bigger ships and better weapons. But you never ask why you need them." "We maintain peace and order across thousands of worlds," Telvanus protested. "You maintain stagnation," Haywan replied gently. "When was the last time any of your species made a real breakthrough? When did you last discover something that changed how you think about existence itself?" The council members looked uncomfortable. It was true that galactic civilization had been stable for centuries, but stability was good, wasn't it? "We tried to show you a different path 50 years ago," Haywan continued. "We wanted to share dimensional technology, to help everyone grow. Beyond the limits of three-dimensional space, you chose to lock us away instead. Your experiments were dangerous." Veltharion spoke up from his advisor's seat. "The Cathani destroyed themselves trying the same thing." "The Cathani failed because they tried to force reality to obey them," Haywan said. "We learned to ask reality politely. The difference is important. She stood up, and somehow the simple action felt like an earthquake. We're not angry about the barrier. It taught us something valuable, that we were still thinking too small. We were trying to improve this reality instead of finding a better one. And now, Telvanus asked, now we're ready to graduate. We've outgrown this universe. The resources we need exist in dimensions you can't even perceive. We're going to build something wonderful there. What about the missing ships? Zekmoth asked quietly. The disappearances? Haiwan looked genuinely surprised. Missing ships? Oh, you mean our supply runs. We needed raw materials for the transition. Don't worry. We made sure all the crews were safely relocated before we disassembled their vessels. Relocated where? Telvanus demanded. Safe places, uninhabited worlds with good climates. We left them supplies and instructions for contacting you. Most of them probably think they were hit by space pirates. The casual way she mentioned disassembling ships and relocating crews made everyone in the chamber very quiet. You have 72 hours, Haiwan announced as she prepared to leave. We'll be gone from this reality by then. The offer stands. Anyone who wants to grow beyond material existence is welcome to join us. The invitation is encoded in the quantum structure of the gift we left you. She walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back. Thank you for isolating us. It was exactly what we needed to learn who we really are. As she left the chamber, Telvanus called after her. What happens to this galaxy after you leave? Haiwan's answer echoed through the Great Hall. That's up to you. You can keep building bigger ships and maintaining order until the stars die, or you can start growing again. We've left you the tools. Use them wisely. The security escort followed her, back to the docking bay, but they had the feeling they were escorting a force of nature rather than a person. Her ship was gone when they arrived. Not departed, but simply no longer there, as if it had decided to exist somewhere else. In the council chambers, 12 species stared at a cube of crystallized light and wondered if they were ready for what it contained. Admiral Keth Tar had commanded fleets for 40 years, but he had never seen anything like the armada assembling at the edge of the Sol system. Ships from every member species of the council filled space as far as sensors could reach. Mighty. Dreadnoughts floated beside sleek cruisers and heavy assault carriers. The combined firepower could destroy a dozen star systems. Final count? He asked his aide as he stood on the bridge of his flagship, Galactic Justice. 4,732 vessels, sir. Every species contributed their finest. Ships, even the peaceful Karani sent their defensive fleet. Keth Tar nodded grimly. When the council had voted to drop the Sol barrier and end the human threat permanently, no one had objected. The humans' casual mention of disassembling ships and relocating crews had terrified everyone. If they could make galactic vessels simply disappear, what else could they do? The barrier generators are in position? Keth Tar asked. Yes, sir. On your command. They'll drop the quantum wall around the Sol system. Then we go in and finish this. Through the massive view screen, Keth Tar could see the barrier itself, a faint shimmer in space that marked the edge of human territory. For 50 years, that invisible wall had kept two civilizations apart. In a few minutes, it would come down forever. All ships report ready, Admiral, his communications officer announced. Keth Tar took a deep breath. Drop the barrier. All ships, advance. If the humans want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. The quantum generators fired in perfect sequence, sending waves of energy that unraveled the complex mathematics holding the barrier together. Space shimmered and twisted as 50 years of isolation came to an end. What they found inside made every admiral in the fleet question their eyes. Where Earth had once orbited around a normal yellow star, there was now a perfect sphere of crystalline material larger than the gas giant Jupiter. The sphere pulsed with soft light that hurt to look at directly. Around it, smaller structures floated in precise formations, geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The sun itself had been changed. Instead of burning chaotically like a normal star, its fusion was controlled and directed through an array of impossible engineering. Streams of pure energy flowed from the star to the great sphere, which absorbed and transformed the power into something else entirely. "Sensor report," Keth Tar ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm not sure how to interpret this, sir," his science officer replied. The readings don't make sense. The large sphere appears to be solid, but it's also showing quantum signatures that suggest it exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What about the other planets? Mars? Venus? Gone, sir. Not destroyed, converted. The entire Sol system has been transformed into some kind of massive machine. On screens throughout the fleet, admirals and captains stared at the impossible sight. This wasn't the primitive human civilization they had expected to find. This was technology beyond anything in galactic history. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission." "From where?" "Everywhere. The signal is coming from space itself." The main screen flickered and showed the familiar face of Captain HFY. But now she was wearing robes that seemed to be cut from starlight, and her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. "Admiral Kethtar," she said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "Thank you for coming to see us off. We weren't sure anyone would bother." "Surrender immediately," Kethtar replied, trying to project authority. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. This ends now." HFY's expression became genuinely sad. "Oh, Admiral, you still don't understand, do you? This isn't about winning or losing. We're leaving. This is just us packing." "Packing what?" "Everything we need for the journey. Your timing is perfect. We're almost finished." On the tactical display, red dots appeared around the human fleet. Ships emerged from behind the crystalline sphere, but only about 24 of them. The human vessels were unlike anything in the galactic database, flowing and organic in design, as if they had been grown rather than built. Kethtar almost laughed. 24 ships against 5,000? You must be joking." "Numbers don't work the way you think they do when you're operating in 11 dimensions," HFY replied gently. "But don't worry, we have no intention of hurting anyone. We just need to collect a few more resources before we go." "Attack!" Kethtar ordered. "All ships, open fire!" The galactic fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy beams that could crack planets, missiles that could destroy space stations, exotic weapons that twisted space-time itself. The combined firepower of 1,000 civilizations filled the space around the human ships with devastating energy. None of it touched them. The human vessels simply weren't there when the weapons arrived. They moved through space like thoughts, through a mind appearing and disappearing without regard for physics or logic. When they reappeared, they were behind the galactic ships, around them, sometimes apparently inside them. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the Battle of Impossible Things. The human ship nearest to Kethtar's flagship did something that hurt to watch. Space around the galactic justice began to change. The massive dreadnought's armor plating transformed into flower petals, real flowers, blooming in the vacuum of space. The ship's powerful weapons became twisted sculptures of metal and light that played haunting music. Kethtar found himself standing on what had been his bridge, but was now a garden terrace overlooking a peaceful lake. His crew sat nearby on comfortable benches, unharmed but completely bewildered. They were breathing normal air under an impossible blue sky, watching their ship become the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. "How?" was all he could manage to say. Captain HFY's voice came from everywhere at once. "We asked reality nicely to be more artistic. Reality said yes." Across the battlefield, similar transformations were happening to every ship in the galactic fleet. One massive carrier became a crystalline structure that sang in harmonies beyond the normal range of hearing. A squadron of fighters turned into a flock of mechanical butterflies that danced through space in perfect formation. The crew of the Zarathi command ship found themselves sitting in escape pods, watching their vessel become a living tree that grew in the vacuum of space. Its branches held fruit that glowed with internal light, and its roots reached out to touch nearby ships with gentle tendrils. A wing of assault ships became a school of fish made from liquid starlight, swimming through space in graceful curves. Their crews were relocated to a nearby asteroid that had been quickly transformed into a comfortable habitat with everything they needed to survive. In 14 minutes, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had been turned into the universe's strangest art exhibition. Not a single being had been harmed, but 5,000 warships had been converted into sculptures, gardens, music boxes, and impossible architectural wonders. Admiral Kethtar sat in his garden and watched human ships move through the transformed fleet like gardeners tending their work. They were collecting materials, the exotic metals and energy systems that had made the galactic ships so powerful. But they did it with such gentle precision that it felt more like surgery than theft. "Why?" he asked the air around him. Haywan's voice answered immediately. "Because we need those materials for our new reality. And because showing you what's possible is kinder than simply taking what we need. You could have destroyed us. Destruction is what you do when you can't imagine anything better. We can imagine many better things." As Kethtar watched, the great crystalline sphere at the center of the Sol system began to pulse with brighter light. The smaller structures around it moved into new configurations, forming patterns that seemed to extend into dimensions his eyes couldn't follow. "We're almost ready," Haywan announced to everyone in the system. "Anyone who wants to come with us, the invitation is still open. Fair warning, once we leave this reality, you can't go back. The journey only goes forward." A few escape pods detached from the transformed ships and moved toward the human fleet. Not many. Most beings were too frightened or confused to accept such an impossible offer, but some were curious enough to try. "What happens to us?" Kethtar asked. "You go home," Haywan replied. "You tell the council what you saw here. You decide whether you want to keep building bigger weapons or start learning to build bigger dreams." The crystalline sphere's light became so bright that every screen in the system had to filter it to prevent blindness. When the light faded, the sphere was gone. The human ships were gone. The strange structures that had orbited the sun were gone. Even the sun had been returned to its normal state, burning freely again without the impossible engineering that had controlled it. All that remained were several thousand pieces of living art floating in space, each one carrying the confused crew of what had once been a warship. And on a small asteroid, emergency supplies and instructions for contacting the Galactic Rescue Services. Admiral Kethtar stood in his impossible garden and tried to understand what had just happened. His ship was now a work of art that would be studied for centuries. His crew was unharmed but forever changed by seeing what reality could become when someone asked it politely to be more beautiful. The darkness was complete. For the first time in 1,000 years, Nexus Prime ran on emergency power. The massive space station drifted silently through space, its great halls lit only by chemical torches and battery-powered lanterns. Emergency. Systems struggled to keep air flowing and gravity functioning at minimal levels. Speaker Telvanus sat in his private chambers, writing by candlelight. The ornate electronic systems that had once managed galactic civilization lay dead and useless. Every quantum computer, every advanced power core, every piece of technology more sophisticated than simple machinery had simply vanished during the night. Not destroyed, not broken. Gone, as if it had never existed. The humans had kept their promise about leaving. They had taken everything with them. Telvanus dipped his pen in ink and continued writing the emergency decree by hand. All council members were to return to their homeworlds immediately. Galactic civilization was suspended until further notice. Each species would have to survive on their own resources until some form of basic technology could be rebuilt. It would take decades, maybe centuries. A soft knock at his door interrupted his work. "Enter!" he called out, grateful for any distraction from the impossible task of dismantling an interstellar government. Zekamoth shuffled into the room, carrying a primitive oil lamp. The old archivist looked exhausted but strangely peaceful. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, placing a handwritten document on Telvanus's desk. "What is it?" "The final human transmission. It came through on the emergency communication system just before that shut down, too. I wrote it down, word for word." Telvanus read the message by flickering candlelight. The words were simple, but somehow carried the weight of cosmic significance. "To the Galactic Council and all member species, we thank you for the gift of isolation. It taught us to look inward and discover what we really were. We have learned to build with quantum foam and dream with mathematics. We have grown beyond the need for this galaxy, this dimension, this particular version of physics. We are moving to a reality where the universe is kinder, where consciousness itself can be cultivated like a garden. We have prepared a place for any species that wishes to evolve beyond material existence. The invitation stands open for those brave enough to ask reality to become something better. Dr. Hyun-woo, on behalf of the Human Collective. They signed it with the name of their lead scientist, Zekmoth noted. The same one who was doing dimensional research 50 years ago. Either he's impossibly old, or they've learned to transfer consciousness between bodies. Telvanus set the message aside and rubbed his tired eyes. It doesn't matter now. They're gone, and they've taken our entire technological base with them. Not all of it, Zekmoth said quietly. They left us the basics. Chemical engines, simple electronics, nuclear power, basic computers. Everything we need to rebuild, but nothing we didn't earn through our own development. How generous, Telvanus said bitterly. Actually, it was. Zekmoth pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. I've been analyzing what they took and what they left. They could have taken everything, left us in the Stone Age. Instead, they left us with technology appropriate to our current level of understanding. We can rebuild from here. On worlds throughout the galaxy, the same scene was playing out. Governments that had relied on quantum communication found themselves isolated from their colonies. Space fleets discovered that their faster-than-light drives no longer functioned. Cities powered by exotic energy found themselves depending on backup fusion reactors and solar collectors. But nobody starved. Nobody froze in the vacuum of space. The humans had been precise in what they took, leaving behind everything needed for basic survival and gradual rebuilding. On Earth's former colonies, human settlers who had been cut off from their homeworld for 50 years found themselves in an interesting position. They still remembered how to build things the old way, with metal and wire and chemical reactions instead of quantum magic. Suddenly, their primitive knowledge was the most valuable thing in the galaxy. Bo Young sat in a refugee center on Proxima Station, watching alien children play with wooden toys while their parents learned to grow food without automated systems. At 93, she was one of the few beings in galactic space who remembered what life was like before advanced technology became commonplace. "Tell us again about the old days," asked a young Zarathi, whose crystal skin flickered with curiosity. What was it like when everything was built by hand? Bo Young smiled and began the story she had told 100 times. How humans had started with stone tools and fire, slowly learning to work metal and harness electricity. How each generation had built on the knowledge of the previous one, discovering new principles and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But why did they work so hard? Asked an avian child whose parents had never known scarcity. Why? Not just be satisfied with what they had? Because humans are never satisfied, Bo Young replied. We always want to know what's over the next hill, around the next corner, beyond the next star. That's why your council was afraid of us. We don't know how to stop growing. Late at night, when the children were asleep, Bo Young would sometimes sit by her window and look up at the stars. She wondered if the humans in their new reality could see her, if they remembered the people they had left behind. On rare occasions, she thought she heard whispers in the quantum static, voices speaking in Korean and English and a dozen other human languages. They sounded happy and excited, like children who had discovered a wonderful new game. Sometimes the whispers seemed to be giving instructions, sharing knowledge about technologies that wouldn't be invented for centuries. Months passed. The initial panic of losing advanced technology gave way to grim determination. Species that had grown comfortable with galactic civilization rediscovered the skills their ancestors had used to reach the stars in the first place. Old factories were rebuilt. Primitive computers were constructed from basic components. Rocket ships replaced quantum drives for short-range travel. The process was slow and frustrating, but it was also oddly satisfying. Young beings who had never built anything with their own hands discovered the joy of creation. Scientists who had relied on quantum computers learned to solve problems through pure thought and mathematics. In the deepest archives of Nexus Prime, now lit by oil lamps and heated by wood fires, Zekmoth continued his work. He had found something interesting in the final human transmission, a complex mathematical formula embedded in the quantum signature of the message itself. Working with pencil and paper, he slowly decoded the formula. It was instructions for building a simple machine. Not with exotic materials, but with basic metals and conventional electronics. A machine that could detect patterns in quantum foam, the fundamental structure of reality itself. When he finally built the device, it immediately began receiving signals. Faint whispers in the quantum static, messages from the reality where humans had gone. They were teaching whoever would listen, sharing knowledge about consciousness and physics and the nature of existence itself. "They're still helping us," Zekamoth whispered to himself as he listened to the impossible lessons. "Even after we tried to destroy them, they're still trying to help us grow." The messages weren't just technical information. They were invitations, detailed instructions for how to follow humanity's path to something greater, how to ask reality politely, to be more flexible, how to grow consciousness beyond the limits of individual minds, how to build civilizations that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Most beings weren't ready for such knowledge, but a few were curious enough to try. On a dozen worlds, small groups of scientists and philosophers began experimenting with the techniques described in the quantum whispers. They started small, learning to perceive 4-dimensional space, teaching computers to think in non-linear time, growing crystals that existed partially in parallel realities. The progress was slow, measured in years rather than months, but it was real progress, built on understanding rather than mere technology. Bo Young died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 97, surrounded by alien friends who had become the family she had never had. Her last words were in Korean, "Save room for us." The next morning, a new message appeared in the quantum static. It was Bo Young's voice, young and strong and filled with wonder. "I made it. The universe here is beautiful beyond imagination. The invitation is still open." Speaker Telvannis, now an old being governing a galaxy that ran on chemical rockets and steam power, read Zekamoth's latest report by candlelight. The archivist had been documenting every quantum message, building a library of impossible knowledge that would take centuries to fully understand. "Some of our people are disappearing," Zekamoth reported. "Not many, and always voluntarily. But every few months, someone learns enough from the quantum lessons to make the transition. They follow the humans to whatever reality they've built." "And?" Telvannis asked. "They send back messages, reports of technologies that work through pure thought, of civilizations that exist in 11 dimensions, of consciousness that can grow, like living things. They say it's wonderful there." Telvannis was quiet for a long time. Outside his window, the rebuilt sections of Nexus Prime gleamed with the warm light of simple electronics and honest,